What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for Sports. So, um, once upon a time, Tracy McGrady was a superstar, and I think sometimes this gets forgotten. A lot of us remember the fact he never got out of the first round. We remember the injuries that plagued him for the last third of his career, but we forget how from 2000 to 2009 he was an all-star who blossomed into a superstar, who for a couple of years was rivaling Kobe as the best perimeter player in the game. I do recall that. I remember this. And he was the link between the smaller 6'3", 6'4" perimeter scorers that came before Michael Jordan and what Kevin Durant became. He was that link. Before McGrady, we had never seen a guy 6'8" that can handle the ball the way he did. Now, of course, Trace McGrady nowadays is a basketball analyst, but he said something interesting recently about his opinion about the 2003 Most Valuable Player Award. He feels that he should have won that award over Tim Duncan. Now, in hindsight, I think that award went to the right person and the right team. Now, this is when Tim Duncan was at the absolute peak of his powers. And in 2003, the San Antonio Spurs won the NBA championship. They knocked off the three-time defending NBA champion Lakers, Shaq and Kobe. And 2003 was the last season, not only for Hall of Famer David Robinson, but it was also the last season for Chicago fan favorite and NBA favorite Steve Kerr. Now, Shaq didn't agree with this. He thought the MVP award went to the right player. And, both make good points, man. Like, Shaq was saying, look, you can't penalize Tim Duncan for playing with Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, because, look, yes, they were all stars, but Tim Duncan made their lives easier from the double teams that he drew, which left them, open shots or easier shots. Tim being double teamed off the left, less defensive coverage on those guys, and they were able to blossom. That's true. When you look at Tim Duncan, because of the Popovich system, where everybody ate, Tim Duncan sacrificed some of his numbers. That season, Tim Duncan averaged 23 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks, 51% from the floor, 71% from the line. Those are still great goddamn numbers, man. Had he played on a bad team or another system, I could see Tim averaging, maybe 27 and 12, 28 and 12. I could see him doing that. But he sacrificed his scoring for the betterment of the team. And I agree with this. I agree with what Shaq is saying. The Spurs won 60 games that year, and that always plays a factor, especially since the 1980s. You know, very, very rarely has the MVP gone to a guy who has been on a team that won fewer than 50 games. In the last 41 years, I think it's only happened twice. Moses Malone in '82, and I think that year, I think Moses won. I think the Rockets won 45 games, and then of course Russell Westbrook in 2017, the Thunder won 47 games. But when you look at both of their seasons, there's a common denominator. Russ had a historic season. He averaged a triple double, something that we had never seen before. And with Moses, his team was not very good at all, but he was putting up unbelievable numbers, like averaging 31 points, which is something you rarely see from a big man, and something like 16 rebounds or so, 17 rebounds, having this unbelievable dominant campaign. But I see Tracy's point too, though, because look, Tracy's point is he had a look. You don't want to say it, but he had a garbage roster. Now remember, at one point, the goal was to have this great team with Tim Duncan, a young Tracy McGrady, and Grant Hill, who was a superstar at the time. Doc Rivers fucked that all up. Plus, Dave Robinson talking into Tim Duncan staying with the Spurs. But still, it's supposed to have been Grant Hill and Tracy McGrady. But Grant Hill hurt his foot toward the end of the 99-2000 season. Didn't realize he had fractured his foot. And this would plague Grant Hill for years, to the point where it robbed him of his athleticism, the subsequent injuries that he kept suffering, the surgeries. It robbed him of his athleticism, robbed him of his prime, and he played very few games with Trace McGrady as a result of this in Orlando. Now you look at the 2003 roster. Yeah, he had Sean Kemp, but by that time he was Sean Blimp, the Rain Man, was now, you know, nothing resembling that guy. Sean Kemp was weighing 320 pounds, 300 pounds. That was his last year. Grant Hill, who was by that time a shell of himself, played in a handful of games. And other than those guys, I'm trying to think who he had on that roster. Maybe Daryl Armstrong, maybe Mike Miller, maybe, and that's it. That garbage that roster was garbage, and as a consequence of that, Trace McGrady, who was going to be more in the Pippen role, while Grant Hill was going to be more of the Jordan role, Trace McGrady was forced to be a scorer, and he went out there and averaged 32 points a game for the Orlando Magic. This was during a time when scoring was much lower and much more difficult to do than it is today. I think the Orlando Magic, I just checked it, averaged 98 points a game that year. If it was not for Tracy McGrady, they would not have made the playoffs. They went 42-40. But that's what hurts McGrady in the MVP conversation is that you rarely see a guy get MVP on a team that's just above 500. It's never really happened. There's only been one player that I can think of that has won an MVP award on a losing team, and I believe that was Bob Pettit. But Bob Pettit had such an incredible season up until that time that they gave it to him. But you rarely see that. And nowadays, they always give it to the best player on the best team, or you have to have a lot of team success to get the MVP award. So, as much as I understand where Tracy McGrady is coming from, I think they gave it to the right person. Remember, in 2006, many people thought Kobe Bryant should have won that MVP award. Kobe did even more for his team than Tracy McGrady did, and they won more games. And unlike Tracy McGrady in 2003, the Lakers had no business even being competitive in that series against Phoenix. Whereas Orlando should have won that series against Detroit. They had a lead and they should have won, but they blew it. Now, I guess you could say the Lakers should have won, but the Lakers shouldn't even been in that position to be up 3-1. They were a 45-win team going up against a team that won 62 games. It was sort of like in a similar vein as how uh, 13 years earlier, the '93 Suns almost blew that first round series to the Lakers. Remember that? They were down 2-0 back when it was the best of five. They almost lost that series before they wound up winning three games in a row to beat the Lake Show. But anyway, that's all I got to say in this video, man. Tell me what you guys think.